Hello again, Scott here from SocialNRG Presents, and thank you so much for joining us. We have another exciting episode coming your way, this time with the incomparable singer-songwriter Barry Greenfield, perhaps best known for his 1972 #1 single, New York is Closed Tonight. Throughout his career, Barry has worked with an incredible array of internationally acclaimed artists including Supertramp, Frank Zappa, John Lee Hooker, Steve Martin, Cheech and Chong, the Pointer Sisters, and many, many others. Throughout his 45-year musical career, he's never stopped writing or performing and continues to partner with some of the industry's best musical talent. And today, Barry joins us from his home in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia to look back on his exciting career in the music industry and bring us up to speed on what he's working on next. So sit back, relax, and get ready as SocialNRG now presents you with your Backstage Pass.
Barry, there you are.
Yes, here I am.
We're all good. So let's dive right into this. I'm gonna put this into a different view for me. There we go. Much better. So Barry, we got it. We met just before COVID hit.
Yeah, we met about, I'm going to say, a week and a half, 2 weeks before COVID hit. I was in Victoria visiting my friend John Shields, and I had the courage to phone you up to meet for coffee to discuss music.
So it was John you were meeting when I met with you.
Yeah, except for you were first and John was second.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I left you to meet John.
And now John and I are partners in this show. And
yeah, it's a small world.
He's our producer. Like, unbelievable.
Mick, there are no accidents, Mick.
Yeah, I suppose not. And your life is full of not accidents.
Yeah, I'm also very proactive and you take chances.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that. I mean, anybody who met John Lennon and was in the same room with him is worthy of being talked to on any level. We'll get to that pretty soon. So you're okay. I always thought you were born in Zimbabwe, but you were born in the UK.
No, I'm a pure Manchester musician, man. I'm the Hollies. I'm the King. I'm 10cc. I'm Herman's Hermits. I'm Oasis. I'm totally Manchester. I'm born and bred, and I still feel Manchester.
Okay, so but you did move to Rhodesia or Zimbabwe.
Oh, yeah. I was 7 years old and extremely happy on my bike with my mates in Manchester in a pretty low-class area called Cheetham Hill. And my dad, like so many white English people in 1958, emigrated. And he decided to go to, of all places, Rhodesia. In those days, white English people fled for Rhodesia, Canada, Australia, and South Africa. They were the 4 points that they went. And so we went to Zimbabwe, which was called Rhodesia back then, when I was 7 years old. And I was there until I was 13.
And what was the calling of Rhodesia? What would make them move there? I could see Canada, perhaps, but
you'd have to ask him, and I don't know. It seems so insane, but in some ways it was an act of courage, and in some ways it was just hard to explain.
And what did he do when he was there?
He was a professional gambler. He was eventually he became a bookmaker, which is a dude who stands on a racetrack behind a wooden sort of like stand-up thing and makes bets on races for people. He was a bookie.
In all the times we've talked, I did not know that.
Yeah, my dad and I are diametrically opposite. I'm a very straight down the middle, balanced financial planner, and he's a rascal.
So possibly you took after your mom.
100%. Everything about me is my mom.
Yeah.
Me.
So when you went to, let's talk about your exposure to music. Were you exposed to music before you went there or after, during?
Well, before I went there, I was exposed to Petula Clark. I was 3 years old, and I got so erotically charged by Petula Clark that I had to hide behind our living room chair. Couldn't bear to look at her. I was so excited. I thought her voice was incredible. This is, I think, is pre-Downtown days, I think.
Oh, yeah, that would have been probably 10 years before Downtown.
Okay, then been Tony Hatch, you're right. And then I remember Frankie Vaughan, who sang a song called Green Door, which was like an R&B song. He was a white guy, too. And he was like an English version of well, not really Elvis, but that sort of thing, Frankie Vaughan. And then I have no recollections until the streets of Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, where on almost every third corner, there'd be an African with a 3-string $6 guitar playing the music that Paul Simon borrowed for Graceland, that CFG sort of rhythm thing. And I remember just falling in love with that African sound. That was my real first introduction to music, was the African music in the street, which was no vocals. And then I heard Please Please Me on a Saturday morning, and everything changed with Please Please Me. And I remember it exactly how it happened. In Rhodesia, they didn't like rock and roll because it was considered black music. And so they wouldn't give you rock and roll. They only gave you Percy Faith and Lawrence Welk and Ferrante and Teicher. But every Saturday from 12:30 to 1, they had a rock and roll show. And it was a female DJ, and the last song she played at 5 to 1, excuse me, was the #1 song on the BBC that week, and it was Please Please Me. And that was the day that changed my life.
That was the first time you'd heard the Beatles, and you were still in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
So when did you move from Zimbabwe back to the UK, or did you?
Well, yes, I did. It's even more complicated, but another reason why I'm sitting talking to Delavi. When I was 12, I went to a very corporal punishment orientated school that was not only corporal punishment orientated, but anti-Semitic. So I was beaten profusely for most of the year. And
for being Jewish?
For lots of things, but, you know, lots of things. Who can tell why? 3 teachers, very, very consistently. So I never finished that grade, which was grade 7. I ran away and then came back and then insisted that I'd move to England. So I was just turned 13 by about 4 days. And I left my mom and my dad and my sister, and I flew to England to live with my aunt. It was 1963, December. And I arrived in England, and I spent 2 years there going to grammar school, living with my Auntie Sadie. And every day we had Top of the Pops, Thank You Lucky Stars, Ready, Steady, Go, Jukebox Jury, all of the Beatles, all of the Kinks, all of the Pretty Things, all of the Foremost, all of the Mersey Beats, all of the English bands. And they became my family because my mom and my dad and my sister were 10,000 miles away. So I fell in love with these bands. And I think at age 70, talking to Delavi, I can understand it. It feels like family to me, that music. And that's why I learned about music.
Well, so that was all BBC produced as well, right?
Yeah, it was the Top of the Pops. Go to YouTube and watch them.
Wow. That's unbelievable. I mean, that's the weird thing about, or the wonderful thing about England, is that they really, really supported their artists, it seems. I just finished a book by Glyn Johns, and it's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah.
Another thing that people don't quite grasp, well, maybe they do, but I don't think they do, is the Beatles were just a band. Like, it was with Beatlemania and the New York and the 64 trip to the States that they became the phenomenon. But back when I was there for their first year of the Beatles with Long Tall Sally and Do You Want to Know a Secret, those songs, they were just a band, the same as the Hollies, the same as Dave Clark 5, the same as the Mersey Beats. They weren't that much more alien. They were just another they were the best band. But on one Monday you'd say, oh, the Hollies are my favorite band. And then on Wednesday you'd love Dead End Streets. It'd be the Kinks. So it wasn't like the Beatles were as dominant as they seem to be 50 years down the road.
Right. And so to back up a bit, so you heard the Beatles in Zimbabwe, and you must have moved to England shortly after that.
Weeks after.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the timeline, because you say 63. Now, we didn't hear in North America until February 9th, 1964. That's when North America landed the Beatles at the Ed Sullivan Show. That was the pivotal day for every musician I know.
Yeah.
In our age group. And so when you get, but 63 was when Please Please Me would have hit in England, and before that was Love Me Do, which did number 17.
Yeah, Love Me Do.
Please Please Me was a number 1.
Yeah, I never heard Love Me Do until many months later. But Please Please Me had the thing that Love Me Do didn't have, which What She Loves You had, and I Want to Hold Your Hand had. It had a new form of joy. The early Beatle music had capital J-O-Y, and it wasn't dour. It was smiles. It was they were smiling musicians, and we all needed that.
Mm-hmm.
We still do, more today in 2021 than ever.
Well, there's speculation that the fact that they came and hit 2 months or 3 months after she was assassinated, the United States was in a terrible down mood, and all of a sudden the young kids get this refreshing thing that the parents hate, but it was, it was magical.
Don't doubt it for a second, Mick. I think the lineage from the assassination in November 63 to the Beatles on February the 4th, 3 months later in New York, it was the perfect antidote to dark. As much light as you can bring into a dark place, and people look at it.
Well, that's the thing, is that not many people are aware of the fact that before Capitol Records picked them up, they were EMI in Great Britain. Yes. Capitol Records picked them up in North America. However, before that, they were signed to Swan Records in the United States and released. They released 2 songs. One of which Del Shannon did one of them. He covered one of them, but and nothing happened. They got North American play before they hit Ed Sullivan months before, but nobody could care less. Yeah, it wasn't until the big machine hit and Murray the K, the big DJ in New York. Yeah, that's right. Saturation, man. Yeah. Interesting, and really it hasn't stopped since. A lot of speculation on that too is that Brian Epstein, their manager, signed so many bad deals that because it was unprecedented. They'd never gone through anything like this before. So somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to make Beatle wigs." Okay, great. How much you want? I'll take 5%. Okay, so those people are still making money off Beatle wigs because they signed away the rights. The Beatles signed away the rights, but that's perpetuated the myth because people keep making money off it. Yeah, I was reading an interesting last night in the Mark Lewinson book about Brian Epstein that I'd never heard or read before or thought about before. And it was about A Hard Day's Night. And they talked about how they got the script for A Hard Day's Night and how they picked Owen, I think it's Owen Davies or Owen something, guy that wrote the script. And they had a lot to do with it. But they never said the word the Beatles in the movie The Hard Day's Night. The word was never spoken in the film. And that was an idea that the Beatles had. And Mark Lewinson went on to conclude, he's obviously the #1 researcher of the Beatles to date, and he said that Brian Epstein got a lot of his direction from the Beatles. Like, he worked for them as opposed to when usually if the manager says make a crappy film, the band would do it, like the Dave Clark Five did it, Herman Sherman's did it. But the Beatles said, no, we're not making a crappy film. We're only going to make a good film. And they understood the direction that this unit should go in. And Brian Epstein was wise enough to listen to the counsel of the genius that George, John, and Paul were. Well, he was routinely kicked out of the recording studio. I mean, he'd walk in, and I think John Lennon had a famous line like, "You go do your numbers, Brian, and we'll concentrate on the music. Like, get out of here." It was so funny. I happened to see Hard Day's Night on one of these stations the other day. And of course, it's one of those things I would have not known a clue about when I was a kid, when I first saw it, because my sister brought me. I was just a toddler. And she brought me to see them. All I remember is girls screaming in the theater. Whenever the Beatles' faces would come on the screen, girls were screaming in a movie theater. And the hysteria was unbelievable. But there's John Lennon in that famous train scene. He's got a bottle of Coke. He opens it up and he goes like this. And sniffs the Coke, sniffs it. And nobody knew what he was doing back then. Nobody knew about cocaine, but he was already playing that sort of bad boy thing in the background. Like, I'm pulling one over on you. Yeah, well, I think the beauty of the Beatles is really the balance of John's bravery, courage, honesty, directness out of the box, and Paul's completely in the box. And of course, Paul steps out of the box, and of course, John steps into the box. But as a rule, the balance, the dichotomy that they both brought is part of the genius of it all, that Paul would never have done that because it would have upset his mom. Well, and I also maintain that, Paul lost his muse when John was shot. To me, even though they were estranged, they the reports are that they did rekindle their friendship before John died, and Paul's eternally grateful about that. But the fact is that they were writing songs across the water, sort of thing, where they knew that they were listening to each other. And so Paul would always have to prove to John that he still had it, and John would have to prove to Paul that he still had it. Actually, there's a period of time I don't think John cared what Paul thought. I mean, the Plastic Ono Band is a great example of that. But Mick, there's a relationship that you have with the person that you love, your partner, your wife, your spouse.
And then there's a relationship you have with your male friends that only men really understand. When you're connected deeply with a guy, like John and Paul were on every level possible, touring, sharing food, traveling, sharing women probably, writing songs. It creates such a depth that you can't imagine that when that's severed, it's like the most ugly of divorces, the most riveting of losing a child, the most imaginable pain. It's equal to that, and very hard for Paul to understand. And he retreated to the Mull of Kintyre and drank and tooted and smoked, I guess, because he couldn't deal with the fact that he was no longer with his bud.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's a beautiful love story in a way, those two guys, and it's sad that it ended in 1980 because they would have rekindled, they would have written together. I never saw the Beatles getting back together, but I always saw John and Paul getting back together. Always.
I was reading the Albert Goldman book, the Beatles, his biography on John Lennon, which was not a flattering picture. However,
Horrible.
I was right in the middle of the book when he's recording with the Cheap Trick guys, because, and he did it on the sly. He had asked, oh God, forgive me, but who's the producer on that? The guy that
Jack Douglas.
Jack Douglas, thank you. And he had talked to Jack Douglas saying, "Hey, there's that band that kind of sounds like the Beatles." He said, "Yeah, Cheap Trick." He says, "Let's get them in." So he brought them in, and they played on 3 songs: "I'm Losing You," "Wheels," I think, "Watching the Wheels," and another one. And apparently Yoko, because she was sort of the grand poobah of the whole thing, getting him together with Jack Douglas and all this stuff, she came in and said, "Who's this?" She was listening to tracks. She said, "Who's this?" She said, "It's these Cheap Trick guys. I brought him in. Isn't it great?" She goes, I didn't okay this. Erase it."
Wow.
So basically the story is that John had the studio musicians, which were great, you know, all the guys that were hired, basically listen on headphones to what Cheap Trick had done and emulate it to the best of their abilities. But that's why Cheap Trick years later released those songs. They had copies of them and released the songs with John and them together.
Oh, they're beautiful. I think they're wonderful.
Yeah.
I do prefer the actual Double Fantasy, especially Double Fantasy stripped versions, but I totally like those. And I know you've had interaction with Cheap Trick in your travels too. And they are an amazing band. There's so many people say throughout time, they're not the Beatles, you know.
Yeah, well, I was in the middle of that book. I was on the road in a Beatles show, Revolver at the time, and we were in Winnipeg. And it was one of those things where I looked and I saw that Cheap Trick were in town doing a concert on the same night that we were playing this gigantic club. It was a big 2-story club, huge, massive place. And it's just one of those things ran through my mind saying, gee, I wonder if they're going to come and see us. And that's it. Then I went and we did our first act, and there was, I think, a half-hour break. So I took off all my Beatle clothes, dressed in my civvies, and decided to walk through the crowd to see what's going on. And all of a sudden, Rick Nielsen walks up and goes, hey, I want to meet you. He says, my name's Rick. I went, oh, yeah, I know who you are. He says, come here. So he brings me over to the table, and there's Robin Zander sitting there. And Robin Zander says, he says, hey, man, we love your show. We go all over the world and see Beatles shows everywhere. You guys are the most authentic one we've ever heard. It's unbelievable how good you guys are. I said, you want to come backstage and meet the guys? He said, okay. So I brought him backstage and to meet everybody. And they said, and I said, well, do you guys want to do our encore with us? They said, okay, sounds like fun. What are we going to do? I said, I don't know, we'll make it up when we get up there. We all know Beatles songs. He said, okay, cool. So they stayed backstage in our green room off the side of the stage. We played our whole second act. And here's the thing is that most people in the crowd didn't know they were there because they were sort of in the shadows off by themselves watching us. So all of a sudden we come back on for encore, and we went up and did 2 songs that we'd never done before. And Robin sang them, one of which was Money. That's what I want, which was fun. And another one. And then that night, me and Michael Sicoli and Robin Zander and Rick Nielsen sat up till 4:00 in the morning talking about stories. Well, of course, the stories come around about John Lennon. And so they said, this is off the record, they said when they were recording with John, they said it was pretty well known that John was not all as happy as he made it out in the press with Yoko. He knew that Yoko was out having an affair with his publicist. And when she would leave the studio, and of course this whole macrobiotic diet, etc., that she's got John on, apparently he had, one of those old ashtrays
Mhm.
That you unscrew the top, the stand-up
Yes, of
ashtrays,
course. Yeah.
and it was hollow on the inside. He had a bottle of Jack Daniel's stashed down there.
How sad.
So as soon as she would leave the studio, it would be like, "Woo, let's go, boys," and it would be like party
Wow.
time. And so and anyway, and so the story is that he was planning on re-recording some of these Beatles songs he wasn't happy with. Strawberry Fields. He even said to George Martin he didn't like how it turned out. He wanted to redo it. So that was his whole thing. He wanted to launch Yoko on her way. Now, this is what they're saying. I'm just sort of repeating. He wanted to launch Yoko's career so that he could have his career back as a solo artist. And part of his game plan was to start redoing Beatles songs again.
Yeah, I had a thought the other day whether he would actually have done "She Loves You" in a live show. I was listening to "She Loves You," the Beatles.
Oh, I
version.
love your version, by the way.
Yeah, well, thank you so very much. One thing I just want to add to that story about John and Yoko is that a lot of the bitter songs that John wrote about Paul, with, of course, the climax being "How Do You Sleep?" John has said in interviews after the songs, "Hey, man, those songs were a lot about me, not about Paul." And one of the lines in "How Do You Sleep" is "Jump when your mama says anything." And
sorry, what was the line again?
Jump when your mama says anything.
Right.
He's referring to Linda, of course.
Yeah.
And you know, when you write songs, they always are a part of, you're talking about yourself on some level, just as Trump is always projecting, you know, when he says things, they're really about him. And I think John, a lot of the times, he was lost, man. His whole life, he seemed a little bit lost.
Mhm.
When he was in the Beatles, he seemed found. And when he got into heavy drugs with Let It Be and Abbey Road, he felt he found it there. You know, he wasn't contributing as much, didn't seem as important. It became Paul's band. And I think if he would have gotten back with Paul, maybe he would have had a career that would have been, not maybe, he would have had a phenomenal career. But we all need partners, Mick.
Well, yeah. Well, the first 3 years of the Beatles' career, John was predominantly the songwriter. He was the one that had the most hits,
More
than Paul.
Yeah, 80%.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to you. I want to talk to you. So, so you go back to England. You're living with your aunt.
Yep.
And what happens? When do you start playing guitar, writing songs, etc.? Is that when you moved to Vancouver or
No.
before?
Okay, so I guess I should follow the chronology, if that's the right word. I stayed in England until I was 15, so it's 2 years. I went to grammar school, 2 of the happiest years of my life, but I really missed my mom, really missed my dad.
What made them happy?
Beatles, Kinks, Hollies,
and being away from Zimbabwe and
being away from racism, being away from apartheid, and being away from danger, and being in my home, which this interview began with, Manchester. I love Manchester. I love Oasis. I love being around Manchester people. I feel at home there. When I'm back in Manchester, which I've been back, I don't know, 50 times in the last 50 years, I just feel like this is my soul. I'm a Manchester lad. So unfortunately, my aunt died when I was 15. So my mom took the opportunity to bring me back. So we didn't go back to Rhodesia. We went to South Africa this time and to Durban. And that was even worse. It was more racist. It was more, as a Jew, I can't handle racism. I can't handle hatred. It's not in me. And the way they treated brown people, the way they treated Black people, you can't imagine as you live in it. It's like levels of class. Like there's a caste system. So I wanted a guitar. I wanted to play guitar, and my dad said, "Oh, you'll never stick with it. You'll never stick with it. You'll never stick." It went on for a long time, many, many months, if not years. And then one day, I don't know what happened, but he broke down, and I got a guitar. And there's a picture that I sent you of me and Jeff with that guitar when I was 15.
Charles can bring it up for us. I want to take a look at that.
That's that guitar. And I thought, Mick, I don't know whether this makes any sense to anybody who's listening to this, but I thought you could just pick up the guitar and start playing I Want to Hold Your Hand. I thought it was that simple. And I couldn't work out any song. I was totally not musical. I totally couldn't sing in key. I totally couldn't play the guitar. I couldn't do anything. So what did I do? I started writing songs.
Interesting. So because you couldn't play their songs, you had to make up your own.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I remember being a kid, and I would, because we lived in Durban, we didn't hear the Beatles or the Hollies or the Kinks or the Who. We knew the song titles. I used to look at the hit parade in the newspaper. And I remember seeing My Generation. And I remember seeing, what's the other one by the Kinks? You Really Got Me. And I wrote a song called My Generation, and I wrote a song called You Really Got Me. And I told people this was the Who song. So I played My Generation, my song, and I said, oh, this is the Who song. I remember doing it. Terrible, isn't it? But I did it.
Not really. I think it's brilliant.
They believed it because I guess the songs had legs.
Charles just said the same. He said, OMFG, same here. So, by the way, I don't know if you were able to see it. You might have to swipe on your iPad.
No, I
Charles
did see the picture.
Did you see the picture? Now,
Yeah,
who is Jeff in the picture?
I had three best friends in South Africa, Jeff, and Murray. And that's my best friend, Jeff. He's just sitting, that's my apartment building where I lived when I was a kid. And that's me playing, I think, C with my $20 guitar. And that was I only knew C and G. And I think I worked out D. And I had a friend in the building who was in the top Durban band. They were called the Deans. And he taught me some chords. And the first song he ever taught me was For Your Love by the Yardbirds, which was written by Graeme Goldman, who became now my best friend.
I know, unbelievable.
And that's the first song I learned was For Your Love, a song I've never liked. I don't like that song.
So what does Jeff do now, by the way?
Jeff is the general manager. He's retired now, but he was the general manager for 45 years of a mattress company.
Wow.
Never left South Africa.
Isn't that great?
He looks the same, but he has no hair.
Okay, so we gotta move. So you get this guitar in South Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in South Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, but Jeff's a white guy, but he's obviously the racist thing. Does he feel the same as you at that time? At that point?
No, the only one that felt the same as me was the other Jeff, and the only reason I felt the way I felt was because the other Jeff's father told me about it. Liberalism. If you're not told, you don't even think about it. If you live in Krakow and there's a concentration camp down the road called Auschwitz, you don't think of it as a bad place if you're not told it's a bad place. It's so weird how the brain works. I was racist until I was 14.
Interesting. Because you didn't understand.
No, I thought it made sense. My dad, my mom, both were racist. They both told me that Africans were way below us. And I thought, well, it must be.
Well, shamefully, I mean, I was totally homophobic.
Yeah,
I was homophobic until I started working with homosexual people, and I went, "What the hell am I worried about?" What? Like all of a sudden, these are normal people. What the hell's the matter with me? And so I try to, and I have so little patience for people that are still homophobic or are still racist and all that sort of stuff. And there's a term called woke. It's overused these days, but so I'm not going to use it. I shouldn't. But the thing is, I have to remember that I was that until my eyes opened up. Just because their eyes haven't opened yet doesn't mean it's not going to. That everybody has their time. Hopefully, maybe they might go to their grave being that way, and that's a sad thing.
Yeah.
But, it's a weird thing. Anyway, so let's go back. So now you went to South Africa. Where'd you go from there?
Back to now I was a devout anti-apartheid supporter. I was a devout believer in moving out of this environment of racism, and I began my campaign to get my family to move out of Africa. And we went to Canada, to Vancouver, because my dad had two brothers living there and he was offered a job. So we packed up, we took what we could, which is mostly the suitcases with the clothes in there, and took my guitar, the guitar you see in the picture, and we went to Vancouver, Canada when I was in grade 11. I did 3 months in grade 11 when I was, I guess, 16.
Okay, and what did your dad do when he got to Vancouver?
He was a salesman. He sold cars, and he became a kind of a crooked Murray Pessim style stockbroker.
I see. So you there's no love lost with you and your dad?
No, it's the truth. I love him madly. He's a great guy. He was a very nice man, but he was a gangster with a small G.
No, right. So
You know, he had no. He was he wa- he took advantage of people like a lot of promoters. I really don't like promoters like the Trumps and the people that just sell. And my dad was nothing like that, but like that with a small L, and it was sad. And went to his grave like that. I got stories that I'm not going to share here, but they're not happy stories.
now, do you think that that's possibly why you had an aversion to actually being more intimately involved in the music business as a performer? Was the fact that you were having to deal with people like that?
Oh yeah, I left the music business after being in it for 18 months because of people like my dad.
Yeah.
And I met them. I mean, I worked with the creme de la creme. I worked with Fred Alec Jr., who was been in the business, born. His dad wrote, sit right down and write myself a letter. His dad owned the whole Billie Holiday catalog. The guy was a multimillionaire, but he was a lowlife.
Yeah.
And he was my manager. And I walked away from it. I just didn't.
And where was he based?
New York.
New York. Okay, so we got a lot of ground to cover before we get there.
We haven't
obviously.
started yet.
Yeah, so we spent so much time talking about the Beatles because we love doing that, but that's okay. Everybody loves talking about the Beatles, right?
Well, what else is there to talk about? Who wants to talk about Barry Greenfield?
But there's always so many.
Yeah.
There's just so many micro stories within the stories of them. You know, it just keeps going and going and going because everybody was touched by them. Anyway, we're going to drift off into it again. So we got to get. So now you're in Vancouver.
Yep.
You're learning how to play guitar. This is we're basically around 1967, Confederation year.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
16 years old.
Okay, great. So now I want you to tell everybody the famous story of how you ended up at 3 Savile Row, Apple Records.
Well, I don't really know how I found the courage to do it. I don't really know how I had the idea to do it, but I didn't spend days mulling it over or discussing it with my friends. I watched John and Paul on The Tonight Show on May the 14th, 1968, and they came out with their sports jackets on. They looked different than the mop tops. They looked older and cooler, and not my generation, looked like older. And they said, come to London, bring your songs, bring your poems, bring your movie scripts. There'll be nobody there in a gray suit, and we'll listen to them. And John Lennon said it was one of the most worst experiences he had doing that show because Joe Garagiola instead of Johnny Carson hosted, which is how Johnny Carson couldn't be there, I don't know. And so I went. 3 months later, I got on a plane. I saved my money. I worked at Budget Rent-A-Car to make the money. I was in First Year University. Maybe I was in grade 12. Can't remember. But I got on the plane and I flew to London. And got off the plane. I went to Earl's Court, got myself a room, left the room, got on the tube, went to 3 Savile Row, looked at it, couldn't believe I was there, went back to the hotel room, crashed because I was so tired from the long flight. The next morning, I went to Apple at 10 in the morning. I walked up the stairs with my little guitar, not scared, not nervous, didn't even really think what I was doing, how crazy to do this. And I walked up the stairs, and I was telling Charles before we started, Mick, that sometimes memories you think are completely crystal clear, but who knows? So this is my memory, brother. This is one of the most important days of my life, and I did think about it a lot. So this is my memory. So I'm walking down this long sort of hall, and there's this desk, oversized oak table, not desk, table, oversized, much too big. And there was this very young English girl, Cockney girl, maybe she was 17 or 18, sitting behind the desk. The desk was more or less empty. And she said, can I help you? And I said, I'm Barry Greenfield, which is how I start up everything. I'm Barry Greenfield, and I'm here to meet John Lennon because he invited me when he was on The Tonight Show. And she got really nervous. Said, do you have an appointment? And I said, no. And she didn't know what to do because nobody else had come. And to my understanding, the only fool in the world that actually did. So she said, have a seat. So I went and sat, and there were these 2 church pews. I remember this really well. They were really long, obviously taken from a church, facing each other in this very, very oversized hallway. And I sat. And lo and behold, 5 minutes later, up the stairs comes John, followed a few steps behind by his wife. And he's dressed in black, and he had the black hat on. And I think it was the same that he wore in the Hate You album cover, I'm not sure, but I think it was. She was dressed in white, and he had this really nice walk, and he looked like John Lennon. He looked smaller than I thought, like you always hear about famous people, except for you, Mick, you look so much taller. And he said, I said, "Hello, Mr. Lennon," which is exactly what Mark David Chapman said to him. And he said, "Hello." And he smiled at me with just a smile that just melted me. And then Yoko walked by, didn't say anything. And then they walked off into a room where I believe Alan Klein was sitting. I'm not really sure, but I think it was. And
Alan Klein was the Beatles manager at that time, for people who don't know.
Just began. And they'd been in Apple for less than 10 days. And the other beautiful part of this story is the McGree picture of the apple cut in half, which was, I don't know, 8 feet by 8 feet, 10 feet by 10 feet, 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet. And a huge picture of this apple was on the floor behind her. It hadn't even been hung yet. They hadn't even hung the picture of the apple. It was still on the floor. I remember that. I thought, Jesus, it must be early. They didn't hung the pictures yet. And then I'm sitting there, and this dude comes out. And this is the part of the story where I'm not sure. I've always thought it was Derek Taylor because looking at pictures of Derek Taylor, but I don't really remember. And this dude comes over, and he was in his mid-20s, and he goes down on his knees. And he's, "Hello, how can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I've come to give John my songs. He invited me from Canada." He said, "Well, John's kind of busy today. Can you leave a cassette?" And I guess I was freaked. I didn't have a cassette. I said, I don't have a cassette. I've never recorded a cassette. I've never recorded any of my songs. And he said, "Well, how are you going to show them to John?" And I picked up my guitar, the guitar you see in that picture in the plastic case. And he said, "Oh," and he thought for a second, and, "Well, will you play them for me?" And I thought it was really nice of him. And I said, "I'd love to," because I wasn't scared. I don't know why. And then we walked past John, and I walked down these long hallways. Every room was empty, as far as I can remember, to one right in the back. And there was a white shag carpet that was really, really dirty. And there was nothing in the room. And we sat down on the floor, and I pulled out my guitar, and I played him 10 songs, and he just loved them. And do you want me to go on?
Please go.
Okay,
yeah.
So he just loved the songs. And he said, "These are beautiful songs, Barry. These are great. Can you come back tomorrow? I want to speak to John." And so I put my guitar back in my case. And I sort of remember getting really nervous then because I didn't know quite, I wasn't really expecting anything. And so I go down the stairs and I go into the street. And the first thing I do is I go to a payphone. And in those days in London, it's hard to believe, children, but you could put a shilling in the payphone.
How much is a shilling, by the way?
10 cents.
Okay.
And you could say, "I'd like to phone collect to Canada." And they would phone collect, and your mom would answer. My mom would say, "Hello, and we have a collect call from your son, Barry. We just set the charges." And she would say yes. And I said, "Mama, I just was at Apple, and they really loved my songs." And my mom, God bless her soul, she said, "Well, you write very good songs, Barry." And I thought that was beautiful. I remember her saying that. "Well, you write very good songs, Barry." She always loved Sweet America best, as does my wife. And
you'd actually written Sweet America back then?
Nope, I wrote that for 10cc a couple of years later.
Oh, okay. Let's get to that. Let's get to that. Okay.
So I then went back the next day, and this dude, who I think was Derek Taylor, the publicist, walked me to EMI, Manchester Square, 10-minute walk. We talked about the Beatles. We talked about Apple. It was really interesting. He wanted my opinion of the songs. He wanted my opinion of the Beatles. He wanted my opinion because I guess I was a regular guy. And I can't remember what I said, but it was obviously positive.
Now, who is this guy?
Derek Taylor. He was the publicist.
So you talked. Oh, so yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense that it would be Derek Taylor.
Yeah,
it does, because he ran the Apple organization. So
yeah, and there wasn't many people there. It wasn't like there was hundreds of people around. There was like no one.
Yeah,
there was no one there. There was John, Yoko, that dude who I think was Alan Klein. He was an old guy smoking a pipe, a Galois cigarette, I guess. And then there was the young lady behind the reception desk. And I didn't think I saw anybody else but this Derek Taylor guy. Apple had just opened. They hadn't done any hiring yet. They had just moved in 3 Sub Road. There was no furniture. It was it was like a vacant office building. And the only thing that made it appear to be the Beatles was John Lennon was there and the picture of the apple on the floor.
Right.
So I walked into Ardmore and Beechwood at Manchester Square. Now, Manchester Square is where the Beatles shot the Please Please Me album cover, where the railing is, and the blue greatest hits and the red greatest hits.
Right.
So I stood at that railing and I said to Derek, is this the railing? He said, yeah, that's the railing. And I stood there and I stood second from the end. And I stood there for as long as they'd let me. And then we go into this office with the head of Ardmore and Beechwood. And he said, play me your songs. He made me a cup of tea. I remember that, drank the tea with no milk. And then I played him my songs. And then he said, let's go downstairs and record Love Is for the Young and Old and With This New Girl. And I go downstairs into the bowels of EMI, never recorded a song in my life. I'm sitting on a wooden stool. I can play my songs really well.
Now, this isn't EMI Apple. This is EMI demo studio in their office building.
In the EMI head office in Manchester Square, London W1, I think it is.
Okay, great. Okay.
It was the famous EMI where Cliff Richards, they're all on that label.
Because a lot of people don't realize that the famous Abbey Road Studios was actually EMI Studios. It became Abbey Road after the Beatles called their album Abbey Road.
Because the Beatles were at EMI. That's who they're signed to, like all
Correct.
the big bands.
Correct.
The Hollies were in EMI, all the big bands. So I recorded 2 songs with this new girl, and Love's for the Young and Old. Took me a long time to do it, to get them right. It was produced by Larry Page from Page One Records, and the Trogs were there. God knows why the Trogs were there, but the Trogs were there. And Reg Presley from the Trogs told me he loved my music, and I didn't care. And then I walked
The very
out.
first song I ever learned was by the Trogs. Love Is All Around.
It's a great song.
Yeah.
He's a talented man with the Trogs. So he I'm very judgmental, I guess, or opinionated. So he said to me, John wants to release this song as a single, Love Is for the Young and Old, with this new girl, Love Is for the Young and Old being the A-side. And if it does well, they want to do an LP with Apple. And there was no business discussion. It was just the way Apple did stuff, by the seat of their pants. And it just, it was like, if you can imagine you're doing something and then somebody says, will you marry me? It's like, what? This is too quick. I don't want to make a record. I want to sing. I want to write songs. I don't want to be singing. I can't sing. And I said, I don't sing. He said, oh, Barry, you sing really well. And I said, let me think about it. So I went home, which is London, Earl's Court, and I hardly slept, and I walked around all day, and I went back the next day to Chris Webb at Ardmore and Beechwood, and I said, hey man, I've given this some thought. It's just not for me. I don't have the backbone. I can't play the guitar. I think it's just a suicide rap. I think I shouldn't do this. I think take these songs and get somebody else to sing them, because I don't want to do it. I didn't come here for that. I came here to be a Tim Penally songwriter. I don't want to be a singer. I don't want women. I don't want any of that stuff. I just want to sit at home and write songs and get an education and be a regular Joe, right? And he was really nice about it, Mick. He was really nice. He said, oh yeah, I totally get that. Well, Barry, you're a really great songwriter. We're here if you ever change your mind. Don't worry, I'll speak to John about it. I'm sure he'll understand. God bless. And that was the end of it. Came home to Canada.
And you went back to Vancouver.
Both of those songs were recorded by Norrie Paramore as instrumentals. And Norrie Paramore was the biggest band leader in England. He was the guy that produced Cliff Richard and the Shadows. And he had a big band, sort of like, I don't know like who, but like a band with 20 people, 30 people. They played instrumentals, and they both were recorded. And I think it went top 40 or something in England.
So what was the deal? Did you actually sign something for that? Or
yeah,
did they
I signed with Ardmore and Beechwood. Okay,
and so you were paid for that?
Yeah, I got money. I got checks. Not big checks, but they were big checks to me. A couple $100, it wasn't bad.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Every time I tried something, it worked. When I contacted you, it worked. When I phoned John Shields in Victoria to meet me for lunch or whatever we did, or coffee, I can't remember what it was, lunch, I guess, it worked. Like I kind of know where I'm going in my boat. I kind of know where the islands are. I've loved my life because I've not wasted it. I love that experience at Apple. It changed my life. It was a really cool thing to do. And it doesn't matter that I wasn't on Apple Records. So what? Who the hell wants to be James Taylor? Not me. Not interested. Don't want to be a rock star. It doesn't interest me. And who knows? It might have gone nowhere as well. You don't know. But Love Is for the Young and Old, Mick, was a really good song. And I'll just add one little side note. One thing, Graeme Goldman and I are just as close as you and I are. And Graeme, who wrote Bus Stop, Things You Do for Love, I'm Not in Love, No Milk Today, and dozens of other Things You Do for Love. Good Morning, Judge.
Heart Full of Soul, right?
Heart Full of Soul, Evil Hearted.
Yeah.
You know something, Greenfield? You can pick songs, and I can. I've always been able to know a song that had legs. And Love Is for the Young and Old, which I cannot play today. James Anstey has a copy of it, but I can't get it from him. Is a really good song. Was a really good song in my memory.
Interesting.
I talked a lot. Hope I haven't talked too much.
No, God, no. This is absolutely fascinating. You've got everybody riveted. I'm seeing comments here going, oh, wow. So no, please open up. This is fantastic stuff. This is what needs to be told. So let's go back. So now you go back to Vancouver. What do you do then? You've just turned down a contract with the Beatles company.
Yeah. You know, Mick, I never went around and told people. It wasn't like it was a big deal to me. It only years later, in hindsight, when I saw what happened with Apple, with James Taylor and Mary Hopkin and Jackie Lomax and Hey Jude, it's never, ever seemed like the wrong decision. Never.
So what did your friends say in Vancouver when you must have told them the stories? There must have been people going, really?
But I'm sure they said, fuck. What the fuck?
Yeah.
What else would you say, right? You met John Lennon, and it just, Mick, you got to follow your heart in this world. You got to listen to it. If your heart's saying one thing, you don't listen to it, you're a fool, man.
Oh, interesting.
I think.
So, well, you're definitely a heart person. I mean, we talk about that a lot. A lot of our conversations are quite deep and spiritual, and and spiritual. Yes, it's spiritual from not a God level, spiritual from a actual human level.
Hey, Mick. Last 3 days, I sent you a song called The Beautiful Band.
Right.
A song I wrote about our favorite subject. And it took me an hour to write, 45 minutes to write, right? I think it's really hard to write great songs when you're famous. I think it's really hard for Phil Collins to write a song after Another Day in Paradise. I think it's really hard for Bob Geldof to write a song after I Don't Like Mondays. I think it's really hard. Somehow I can write songs that I consider to be as good at 70, which I am now, as when I was 22, 17. I mean, Cat Stevens writes really good songs, but they're not as good as Tea for the Tillerman. They're not as good as Tears from the Firecat. When you've had that enormous fame, you can't seem to find a place in your soul because your soul has been changed, because people have told you, oh, you're so good. Oh, you're so handsome. Oh, you're so good in bed. Oh, you've got so much money. Oh, pay for this, pay for that. You never know who your friends are, And I think I've been blessed by turning down Apple. I'm not saying it would have turned into gold. I don't know, and I don't care, but I don't think it would have worked. And who knows?
That makes me reflect on something. I've often said I'm grateful being a never was as opposed to a has been. Because it's true. Because I'm always trying to achieve something that I haven't attained yet. Those people have already attained it, and they're trying to get it back. That's a harder step.
Well, Mick, you and I have done some songs in the last year and a half. We've done maybe 12 songs, and maybe 3 of them, Cupid's Arrow, Hanging On to You. I've got a very soft spot for I Wish Obama Was Here. We've done some gems, and because we're never wases. And I think something happens to you when even take a guy like James Blunt. He wrote that beautiful song called 1985 about how writing the song Beautiful, destroyed him. He could never write a song that anyone would listen to again. And it's a really interesting song for your listeners and viewers to search out. 1985 by James Blunt. It's on an album from 2018. And it talks about what happens when you write a hit song. And you look at Cat Stevens, who wrote Pop Star, I Don't Want to Be a Pop Star. Cat Stevens played it right. He played it right. He was on the road to find out. He was always looking for a bigger thing than stardom. And I think Cat Stevens is something special as a human being. As a human being.
Yeah, I agree. I have respect with where he went, against all odds, much like Muhammad Ali, actually.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Laura and I have been watching a series of movies about Gloria Steinem recently, and last night we watched the Three Glorias, I think it's called, and it's not as good as the Mrs. America one series, but Gloria Steinem is an icon to me. The way she handled her life, the way she tried to refuse the stardom, the way she throws about the big people, the women's movement, not about her. So Gloria Steinem is another icon to me. The women's movement has been incredibly important to me as well, because it's probably the best song I ever wrote was a song called "Free the Lady," which is about my mom. And it's a song I wrote in 1968, and it's on the Blue Sky record, the early years record. And that song still has legs. I'm going to resurrect that song.
Interesting. Okay, so now you've gone back to Vancouver.
Yep.
But there's a whole other chapter that opens up a couple of years later, is it?
Yeah, 10cc
so what? So how the hell does all that happen? Let's get onto that story. So you're back in Vancouver. And what are you doing with yourself? Have you gone to college? I heard that at one time you wanted to study law.
I started law school and walked out of it. Didn't like the people in the classroom with me. I don't like lawyers. Hey, lawyers, I don't like you. I don't think that lawyers, obviously this isn't true for all lawyers. I mean, there's obviously lawyers that help people. But money, the fact we have lawyers and people of medicine on such pedestals really irritates me. I think plumbers and electricians and grandmothers and cab drivers are important people, and record producers and John Shields, they're all important people. The lawyers irritate me, and I looked around the room and just thought, these guys aren't me. I can't spend 3 years with these people. So I walked away and recorded New York Post Night almost the next day at Tom Northcott's studio.
Really?
Yeah.
And New York is closed tonight. Tell the story of that, because that song was incredibly it got successful, and the Bo Diddley connection and all that.
It's bizarre.
Holy, let's hear that stuff.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll tell you how it came about, because it's an interesting story and it's true.
Sure.
This is much clearer to me than some of the earlier stories. But I was working at the Bay on Thursday nights, Friday nights, and all day Saturday in the very first teenage department at a department store. Prior to this, there was children's and adults. So in this year, which was, I guess, 1970 or 1969, they decided to open a teen department, which catered to people between the ages, let's say, 15 and 22 or something. So I worked in that department, and it was called Vibrations. So I went home one night and I wrote a jingle for them. And I went up to the general manager of the Bay and I said, I've written a jingle for the department. And he said, what? And I said, I've written a jingle for the department. And he said, okay. So I pulled out my guitar and I said, whoa, that's really, really good. How long will it take you how much will it cost me to make that a jingle into a 60-second piece for the radio? And I said, $600. And I could have said $4,000. I could have said 80. I had no idea. $600. Okay. Mary, write Mr. Greenfield or Barry a check out for $600. So I get a check, $600, a huge amount of money. And I found out the best studio in town was Tom Northcott's on 12th and Arbutus, Studio 3. So I probably get the bus to Studio 3 with my guitar. There's Tom Northcott. I recognized him from being Tom Northcott. And I said, I have $600. I'd like to make a jingle. Okay. So in the studio, hanging around, was a guy called, you might know this guy, plays in Trooper, and in those days it was called Applejack. His name is Smith.
Oh, Brian Smith, yeah.
Right, you know him?
Really good friend, yeah.
Well, tell Smitty, he's the guy that played on New York Post Night, never paid. And
Are you serious?
I'm 100% serious. And he's the guy.
Oh my God, I was just talking to him the other day.
Well, tell him I love him, and I really respect him.
Oh, he's a lovely guy.
And I'm not sure. I think I offered to pay him, and he said no. I think he thought I was just a kid. And so he was there, and Ken Lundgren, who was a bass player I knew, was there, and we knocked off the jingle in whatever, Vibrations is my home, I go there. Vibrations is my place, I go there. I love Vibrations. It was a minute long. I timed it. It had a 40-second bed in the middle where we played instruments, mostly my guitar, and Smith doing something. And then I went to Tom Northcott and I said, okay, he said, well, you got $450 left. And I said, oh, I didn't spend it all. He said, no. I said, okay, guys, would you help me? And Smith said, yeah. And Ken said, yeah. And so we went into the studio, back in the studio, and I had 2 songs ready, New Year's Close Tonight and a song called John Roll On. So we did New Year's Close Tonight in 2 takes. I played the acoustic guitar, Smith played the guitar, which has become an iconic sound to me, and Ken played the bass, and I played a hand drum that was broken. So that's why I had the heartbeat, boom, boom, boom. Whoever the engineer was, engineered it, and within 20 minutes, New Year's Close Tonight was finished. We spent the next 3 hours doing John Roll On, and that was going to be the A-side. And that was the end of it. And Ken Lundgren, who was the bass player, worked for the Province. He was the Tom Harrison before Tom Harrison.
And the Province was a local newspaper in Vancouver.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
So he was reviewing Bo Diddley. So he went to Bo Diddley to do an interview after Bo Diddley's show. I believe it was at the Commodore, but it might not have been. It could have been the Savoy. I don't really know. And he said, hey, can I play you this song about New York? Played it for Bo Diddley. Now, Bo Diddley is not folk music. I mean, I guess you could call that ethnic blues folky, but you wouldn't think, right? But he thought, oh, this is really great. Can I have a copy of that? So Ken gave him the cassette, because we had others. And the next thing you know, my phone is ringing, and I've got a phone call from this dude in New York, Fred Allett, A-L-A-H-L-E-R-T Jr. And he's got a New York accent, and he says, Barry Greenfield, this is Fred Allett in New York. I'm the owner of Blue Seas Music. We publish Bacharach and David. And I have a Third On Music, and I have a Thursday Music. And I think your song is the #1 song. And I said, what song? He said, New York is closed tonight. I said, great, get someone to sing it. And he said, I want you to sing it. And I said, no. And it went on for 6 months, man. He'd phone me every month and begged me to sing the song. And I said, no. One day he phoned me 6 months later from this first phone call. He phones me up and he says, I'm in San Francisco on Thursday. Will you come down and meet me? And I said, well, I don't have any money to fly to San Francisco. He said, I will get you the ticket. Just go to Air Canada, give them your name, show them your passport, and they'll have the ticket waiting for you. I'll have a limo waiting for you at the airport. Get in the limo and they'll bring you to a restaurant on Fisherman's Wharf, and you'll recognize me because I'll be waiting for you. Just ask for Fred. So I got on the plane the next day, went to San Francisco the next day, and I really liked him. And I signed the contract there. And he signed me to Laurie Records, Laurie, out of, I think it was out of somewhere in the East, Detroit or somewhere like that.
Yeah, we've got pictures of all this. The Laurie record label.
Yeah,
and
it came out and it went to #1 in Canada forever. And Daryl Burlingham told me it was the most played record in Canada in 1972. Yeah, and I
world famous, Canada's famous DJ, Daryl B. He broke a lot of people.
Yeah, he also the reason Taking Care of Business exists.
Exactly. And, he was the one that came up with the line "Taking Care of Business." He didn't realize it, but he did.
And he's the one that told me New Year's Close Tonight was the most played song on Canadian radio that year. So you should be very proud of that, Barry. That's an achievement only one person achieves every year. And it got played so much, Mick, because of Canada content. I mean, the reason Terry Jacks exists, he sucks, is because of Canadian content. The reason Burton Cummings gets so much airplay, and he doesn't suck, he's okay, is because of Canadian content. I mean, I got so sick of Gordon Lightfoot, so sick of Anne Murray, so sick of Randy, so sick of those guys. Overplayed. And it's happened to the Beatles over the years, and it's happened to Led Zeppelin over the years. Too much play, right? It takes away some of the originality, some of the spark. And so New Year's Close Tonight fit in a 33% section, written by a Canadian, recorded in Canada, Canadian content. So, and it was a crappy record. It was done in 2 takes. It was really, really not a good sounding record, but it had a je ne sais quoi about it, an honesty about it. So it went to #1, And Fred Allett then takes the song on Laurie Records to RCA and negotiates a 3-year contract, 3 LP contract with RCA Records, and gets 20 grand. And the deal I had with Fred Allett was every penny I got, he got 50% of it. Plus he got all the publishing. So I got 10 grand. Now 10 grand to me was a lot of money, and it still is, but it was. And he then flew me down to LA, where I was interviewed by 3, I wasn't interviewed, I interviewed 3 producers to produce my first album. And I introduced Paul Rothchild from The Doors, who was too spaced out for me. Another guy who I don't remember, but really famous, don't remember who it was. And the third guy was a really overweight by maybe 100 pounds, 5'2", never made a record in his life. The staff producer at RCA, David Kirschenbaum. And I really liked Kirschenbaum. I liked his softness. I liked his heart. I liked the way he talked to me. I liked the way he loved his wife, who he's since divorced, but he loved his wife. I love people who love their wives. John Shields. I love that. And I picked him. And Fred said, how could you pick him over Paul Rothchild? And I said, I think Paul Rothchild's a fantastic record producer, but he doesn't really listen to me. He just talked to me. And I think I want to be part of the record. If I'm going to take this huge step that I've refused, I want to be co-producer. I know what I want. I don't want to be told how to do it. And Kirschenbaum, to his degree, let me have a big input. And so we made this LP built around New York's Close Tonight with the best players in America. It's called Double Scale Players. And it was probably some of the finest 3 weeks of my life, all those in New York Close
So
Tonight.
who are the players that were on that album? Did you have some good ones?
Yes.
Like name ones?
Well, there was the best. They were not only the best in name, they were the best players. The only equals I played with are the guys in Nashville in the last 6 or 8 years, and Mick DeLaVie, a guy who I know in Victoria. But there was Larry Carlton on guitar. And Larry Carlton had played on every single session from...
Oh, he's the best. He's amazing.
He was the guy that I loved the most. He was the best.
Nice guy.
Super. And he came in with a little sort of caravan, and his roadie opened the doors, and there was like, 30 guitars in the caravan, and he picked one out. And the way Larry did it, which might really appeal to you, Mick, he sat on a chair across from me and he said, play me the song. So I played him the song in my primitive way, the way I play it for you. Like I remember with Quiet Canadians, how we started off our journey. And he just sort of copied my style. He sort of copied it. The way if I used my fingers, he used my fingers. If I strummed, he strummed. If I used the capo, the capo. And the other thing that strings about Blue Sky is I always had my guitar tuned down half a tone. So the whole album is down half a tone. Everybody had to do that. And Larry Carlton learned the song. And before we actually, and the other players, then I'll get to the arranger in a second, Larry Carlton, Dean Park's second guitar, he was really good.
These are all like Steely Dan people.
Yeah, they all played on Steely Dan. Joe Osborne, who played that riff in Mr. Tambourine Man, was with the Wrecking Crew. Joe Osborne on bass, he played on Simon & Garfunkel's.
Yeah.
Joe Osborne on bass, who was like just a rock. The bass player to me is the most important player around for my music. The drum, I had 2 drummers because the one guy's the Conflicts, but listen to the 2 drummers, completely different characters. We picked the right one for the right song. I had Russ Kunkel from James Taylor, Carole King's band, playing on 3 or 4 of the songs, and on the other 7 songs or 6 songs coming over on the album, I guess it was 10, was Jim Gordon, who was from Derek and the Dominoes, who wrote Layla with Clapton, who eventually went to prison and was murdered in prison. He was a peculiar guy. Yeah. He was 6'6" tall, and just like Doris Maxwell and just like Jerry Adolph, hit the drums 10% too hard. Right. Just listen to me. I'm in charge of this room. Yeah. Bang, bang, bang. And Russ Kunkel was the opposite. He was genteel, sensitive, subtle, and they both played a role. And on New York's Close Night, on the RCA version, which had an instrumental tag that I stole from Ram, Jim Gordon flies through that. He was the right guy.
Stole from Ram in what way? The Paul McCartney album, you mean?
Yeah, the way McCartney ends songs and he goes, I'm not going to do it because I'll embarrass myself. But when he could, he would do these screams. Like backseat of my car, he comes back with an instrumental thing.
I see. I tag out.
He does 2 chords, usually D and C. He goes up and down.
Right.
And he goes, and I just love that. Paul McCartney does the same thing over and over again. He does descending bass lines and ascending vocal lines. He does the same things in so many of his songs, like 1985, where he goes to a stop and then starts again. I think if you're going to steal from the best.
Yeah.
So I stole that from Paul McCartney. And the reason that album is so great is because of 2 people. David Kirschenbaum, who became one of the best producers in music history, got 75 Grammys, don't know how many gold records, did Cat Stevens, Bob Dylan, Supertramp, all of Tracy Chapman, all of Joe Jackson. I was the first record he ever did. I was the guy who gave him the break. I was the guy that hired him. And Kirschenbaum told me that on the phone 10 years ago. And the other reason was Jimmy Haskell. Jimmy Haskell was the greatest arranger ever. Bruce Springsteen's finest album to me is the one he did 2 ago, Western Stars. And it's an homage to Jimmy Webb and that's late 60s music. And that's Jimmy Haskell, where he arranged stuff. So I flew to LA before I did this LP, and I lived in Jimmy Haskell's house for 3 days with him and his wife. And we spent 3 days arranging these 10 songs on Fender Rhodes. So when the boys came to play, we sat in a circle. I didn't play. I sat in the middle with a microphone, and they were circled around me in Studio B in RCA, grand piano, Larry Netzel on grand piano, the guy from Bread who played Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Oh, yeah,
Netzel.
Oh, man.
Playing the grand
Unbelievable.
piano. Jim Gordon on drums to my left. Larry Carlton looking at me, so I was always singing to Larry. Dean Parks when he was needed, and a guy called Joe Estes, I think that was his name. His last name was Estes anyway, on percussion. And we played it all live. The only overdubs we did were lead guitar and background vocals, which we used Mary Clayton, the one from Gimme Shelter.
Right.
And another woman.
She was pregnant when she sang that.
Yeah, well, she wasn't pregnant with singing mine. She was hot, and she was, oh, God. Oh, it was incredible to hear these, what I call, bedroom songs. I'd sit on my single bed, writing these songs, and then hear this band bring them colors and rainbows and hues and make them so much better than they actually were, although they couldn't be anything without the nucleus, but they colored them. Mm-hmm. All because of New York Goes Tonight.
Well, Mark LaFrance was on this show, and of course, he was a big advocate of neighboring rights, and that's one of the main things. And neighboring rights, are you familiar with that?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, neighboring rights, you know how a song gets played on the radio and the record company makes money, the writer makes money, the publisher makes money, yada, yada. And the mechanicals are sales, which don't exist anymore, really. But Mark lobbied for something in Canada that was recognized all over the world, except for commercial radio in the USA, which may turn around now, with the new president coming in, with Biden coming in. But anyway, getting back to the story,
Amen.
Neighboring rights is basically it's a royalty for the people who played on the song. So rather than just make what's his name? Norman Durkee made, I think it was like $60 or $70 playing piano on Taking Care of Business. And he walked out. That's all he made off that song. Now with neighboring rights, like Mark is collecting big checks now because it wasn't accepted by commercial radio. I got to go on in the United States, but it was accepted by digital radio. So when digital radio hit, and it hit in a big way, look at Howard Stern. He's still the biggest radio show in town, and he's not on commercial radio at all. Yeah. And so Mark is making a pile of money now as a session singer player. And you just said why. You took those bedrooms, they take those bedroom songs and that nucleus of a great idea and make it into this majesty. It's you can't understate how important great musicians are on a song.
Well, I'm a financial planner and have been for 42 years. And you learn when you do financial planning in a corporate environment that you always deal with the guy or the lady who signs the checks. You deal with the head. In this case, it was the guy who wrote the song, Barry Greenfield. But the corporation is Dick without the key people, without the controller, without the general manager, without the product manager, without the people the HR people. So your corporation is only as good as the nest, and your song is only as good or as shit. Like, you know, people say, oh, McCartney was the most talented Beatle. Bullshit. The four of them.
Yeah.
The group, it's the group. Mick and Barry working together. It's a team effort. It's like you're as good as your weakest link and you're as strong as your unit and as your trust. And even though everyone has a veto, everyone also should be open to listening to the other person's thinking, because it makes it stronger when the corporation has people in a boardroom chatting up. And Mark LaFrance is 100% right. Sign me up, Mark.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that we've touched on this with our writing. There's times that you'll throw an idea at me and I'll go, I don't know, but I do try it. And a lot of times you're totally right. I didn't hear it, but when I did it, I go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I can go with that. It's something I would have never thought of. But to automatically say no to an idea before you try it is absolute suicide when you're being creative.
Yeah, and I think, again, back to our favorite subject, when I listen to a lot of, especially John Lennon tracks, post-Beatles, I listen to Klaus Voormann playing bass. It just saddens me when I think what Paul would have done to that song. Even if it's a song like Cold Turkey, where Klaus is playing the bass that I would play. Dum, 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 dum.
Yeah.
Paul would have done Come Together on it. He would have done something. And, you know,
because he could get away with it with John. He could experiment with John. With all the other people, John was like Grand Poobah. So they just sort of did what he said. And that takes away. And McCartney too. You know, McCartney's stuff has suffered because he doesn't have that friction.
And the thing about John Lennon is that in the Wooden Fate in 1957, when he was on that little trolley, when he was playing the songs, Bebop-A-Lula or whatever, and he met Paul McCartney that day, he knew that he'd be better with someone equal than just being the King Poobah. Yeah. And I think that never, ever changed. And I think his solo music, even a great, perfect song like Number 9 Dream or Mind Games, put McCartney and Harrison on those songs. And, you know, people rave and go on and on and on about All Things Must Pass, which is one of the best Beatles solo albums ever. Put Paul and John in there and you get Taxman. You know, put Paul and John in there, and instead of running, get something far more expressive, like I Want to Tell You. It makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, what McCartney did with George's Something is out of this world.
Yeah.
The bass lines in that song are just, they're as good as the song and as great as his guitar. That's one of his best guitar solos ever. It's a total departure from the melody. You can hum that guitar solo. Yeah. It's stunning, the work on that. And I've got the tracks. There's another show I'm going to be doing on here with John, and it's going to be called Inside the Music. And we're going inside all of these tracks that I've been accumulating for years of the actual sessions. When you isolate what Ringo is playing on something, of course, there's overdubs. In the bridge. You're asking me, will my love grow? What he's playing there is, when you isolate it, you go, what the heck is going on? It sounds like a car crash, but when you put it in the song, it's unbelievably good.
Yeah, there's a magical thing that happens with love, right? Whether it's you and your prominent other, personal other, wife, husband, the person that you love so much, that's so beautiful. And when you're in a room with the band, which of course you and I have never done, it's all been like this.
Yeah, virtual.
But when you're in the room with those four dudes, the parts, the whole is bigger than the parts, and that's because the word love is just, they love each other, and those crazy things that Ringo would try, Paul might massage him a little bit. No, just less Tom, and together they came up with these brilliant interludes that are evident in so much of their music.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's basically this company that we have with Scott here. That's been alluded to a few times. It's just. There's a magic that's created when you get like-minded people together, coming together, because we're growing exponentially with this little enterprise, and we love it. It's the same as me and you with our songwriting, how fast that came together.
Yeah, and let's talk about Howard Stern for a second. Do you think it's just Howard Stern?
Of course not.
No.
Robin Givens is huge.
Yeah, and there's smaller people. There's all kinds of people that make it happen. You know, the ones that pick him up in the morning in front of his apartment, you know, and bring him to work. It's all integral. It's all essential. And the reason Howard Stern is the biggest voice in radio is because of Howard Stern plus, plus, plus. And the reason Blue Sky works so much is because of all of those guys in the room and Jimmy Haskell. I never work with weak. I only want to work with people that are my equal, or more importantly, better, because you shine when you're with better. You're forced to rise. If you're working with people that are better than you in their field, you have to play your A game. Otherwise, it's going to be evident you're not carrying enough water.
We have to go back a bit, just for a second. And I think this may have been when your relationship with Graeme Goldman may have germinated. I'm not sure, but if you go back to 1970, because New York was closed, was what, 73?
72.
72. So 2 years earlier, you're in the UK and you meet up with Harvey Lisberg, and he's the manager of Herman's Hermits at 10cc. Is that how you meet Graeme Goldman?
Yes.
Okay. So, but now 10cc, were they together in 70? I didn't hear about them until much later.
No, they were called Hot Legs, and they didn't include Graeme. The very first record 10cc ever made in the studio was the 10cc Barry Greenfield song, Sweet America. It's the first time they ever got together.
They recorded your song?
Sweet America, they're the backup band. And Graeme produced it.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's a different version. That's the English version that was the BBC record of the week that 10cc did.
Wow.
They weren't called 10cc, they were called Hot Legs. Remember Neanderthal Man? I'm a Neanderthal man. You're a Neanderthal girl. That's Hot Legs. Hot Legs is 10cc.
So with that version, you sang it?
Oh yeah.
So by that time you were over yourself as a singer. You were singing songs and it wasn't bothering you anymore.
I've never gotten over myself as a singer. No, I knew that I think the thing was I just done more in my living room and for people. I used to play at parties, and I'd done a couple of gigs at the Evergreen Hall. I played at a room in Commercial Drive, 30-minute sets with rock bands. You know, I'd done some shit. I'd stretched my wings a bit. So yeah.
You're a little more confident.
Yeah, that's the word.
And how did you meet Andrew Lloyd? How did you meet Andrew Lloyd Webber? Was that through him as well?
No, Harvey Lisberg, who was my manager, was Andrew's manager.
I see. Okay.
He managed lots of people.
Okay, so let's go into Graeme Goldman. And I want you to tell our audience more about Graeme. Some people know his legend. Some people do not. Let it out.
Well, I'll just begin my story about my brother, because he's my brother and I love him like you do a brother, by saying of everybody that I worked with in my life, the most talented person I've ever been in the room with is Graeme Goldman. He's not only the best songwriter I've ever written with or worked with, he's the best guitar player I've ever worked with. He thinks really quick and he works really hard. And a lot of my work ethic I learned from sitting at his feet, watching him work. So the way the story goes is I flew to Manchester because I wanted to make a record in England. And I got on a bus, a double-decker bus.
No, okay. What's the timeline of this? Where is this? Is this after New York is closed tonight?
No, this is before New York is closed tonight.
Okay,
68.
Okay.
So I flew to Manchester to live with my Auntie Sadie. No, she was dead. To live with another aunt. And I got on a bus and I had my guitar. And for some reason, which again is angels, as Laurie would say, guardian angels, there was a girl on the bus. And I went to the girl and I said, do you know any musicians in Manchester? I'm here to meet musicians. And she said, oh, well, my boyfriend is Lal Cream and he's in a band. And I said, oh my God. Can I have his phone number? And she said, yeah. She gave me his phone number. Now, Lal Cream was, for one of the more evil description, the short guy in 10cc. Was
Godfrey and Cream. Yeah.
Godfrey and Cream. So I came home and I phoned Lal Cream on the phone. He answered the phone and he was pure nasty. He was furious that this girl gave me his phone number, furious that I'd have the audacity to phone him. I spent a lot of time with Lal over the next 2 years, next year and a half, and he was not a nice guy. The other three guys were really nice, but he was not. So I got the bad one, but it worked out anyway. He said, "Don't effing speak to me, you effing asshole. I don't have time for this shit. Phone my manager." "Oh, well, thank you so much, Lol." I always thought Lol was a stupid name. His name is Lawrence. And I said, "Thank you so much, Lol." God, Lol. Suits him. Have you ever heard the song, "I Want to Rule the World, the Biggest Man That Ever Ruled the World"? They wrote that about Lol because that's who he was. He thought he was just God.
Wow.
And he gave me Harvey Lisberg's phone number. So I phoned Lisberg up. And again, an act of courage. The lady on the bus was an act of courage. Phoning Harvey Lisberg was an act of courage. And going over to Harvey Lisberg's house that night was an act of courage. And going to Apple was an act of courage. Phoning you was an act of courage. So he says to me, Harvey Lisberg says, "Oh, well, I don't know. What do you got?" And I said, "Well, I'm a songwriter and I'd like to talk to you about my songs. I'm looking for a publishing deal." He says, "Where do you live?" And I told him. He says, "Well, that's about a 20-minute walk from my house. Come on over." And I said, "When?" He said, "Now." So I take my guitar and I walk the 20 minutes. And I'm not very good at directions, but I do find the place. And I knock on his very, very, very expensive house. And this sort of rotund accountant, because he was an accountant before he was a manager of Herman's Hermits and Freddie and the Dreamers, opened the door. And he was quite kind, quite warm, quite friendly. He took me into this very small little study. And I pulled out my guitar and I started playing a song. And before I was 30 seconds into the song, he picks up the phone and he phones this person and he says, "You're not going to believe it. This guy walked into my house 5 minutes ago and he sounds just like Cat Stevens." And I'd never heard of Cat Stevens. And this guy says, "Uh-huh." And he says, "Come on over and listen to him." And this guy says, I know this now, but I didn't know then, "I'm on my way to the airport. I'm leaving for the airport in 10 minutes. I'm going to Mallorca on holiday." So Harvey says, "Well, stop it on your way to the airport, only for 10 minutes. So guy puts down the phone and he says, "Graeme Goldman's coming over to hear your song." And it could have been Paul McCartney to me. Graeme Goldman is like the top of the food chain. He wrote "Bus Stop," "Look Through Any Window," "No Milk Today," "Evil-Hearted You," "Heart Full of Soul," East Side, West Side.
Back when he was like 14, 15. When he was like 14, 15, he was amazing.
Yeah. His mother went to the manager of the Hollies and said, "You got to hear my songs, my son's songs." And Graham Nash, what's the guitar player's name? The guitar player, three of them went over there with Alan Clark, Graham Nash, and the guitar player, who I really liked a lot, forgotten his name. Thought Graham was a genius. Graham is a genius. He played "Bus Stop," "Look Through Any Window," and "No Milk Today." And Graham said, "I can't give you No Milk Today because I promised it to Peter Noon."
For Herman's Hermits.
So anyway, 15 minutes later, in walks this really tall guy with this heavy coat on, expensive, heavy scarf on, and his wife, Susan, who I fell in love with, and says, "What you got?" And I played him 2 songs, 3 songs. And he says, "All right, they're brilliant. I'll be back in 10 days. We'll go in the studio with my friends, write me a single." And I said, "What's a single?" And he said, "Write me a song that's no longer than 3 minutes and 20 seconds and make sure it has a chorus and make sure it fits repetition and for the radio." And okay, because I didn't care about singles. Mm-hmm. And it was gone. Graeme Goldman was gone. And Harvey Lisberg got paperwork drawn up and I signed a contract and he agreed to pay me £25 a week to sign with his Kennedy Street company. And I one day, a year and a half later or so, asked him why he paid me £25 a week and paid Andrew Lloyd Webber £20 a week. And he said to me, "Because Andrew asked for 20 and you asked for 25. What a lovely story. I love it. And so Graham came and we went into Strawberry North. And I'd never done this before. I played my song on the acoustic, "Sweet America," which I wrote on my Aunt Sadie's couch. And lo and behold, we had a song. And we did 2 songs, "Sweet America," with 10cc playing all the instruments, singing all the background vocals, and the B-side, "Dorothy's Daughter." And it was incredible fun, really great fun. It was so talented.
Did it do okay for you in England?
No, not really. When it was released on Philips, which is a big label in Europe, it became the BBC Record of the Week. And that means that it's played every day from Monday to Friday at 7:45 on BBC One with trumpets, fanfare, and Tony Blackburn, who was the #1 DJ in England. Ladies and gentlemen, the BBC record of the week this week is Barry Greenfield, Sweet America. And then he'd play the song. And the week before was Another Day by Paul McCartney. And the week after was the Carpenters' Ticket to Ride, 2 Beatle bookends. And both those songs went top 10. But my song didn't go top 10. It didn't do very much. I think it went top 50, top 40. And I'm not
Maybe
quite
disillusionment
sure.
with the United States?
You're never going to know. I mean, Fall Down on Your Knees and Cry, the line in the song, has been the strongest line in the song and the one that's caused it the most turn off. So I don't know. Wasn't meant to be.
But
Wasn't
Buffy
really that good a record.
Buffy St. Marie covered it.
Yeah, it went #8 with her
Wow.
in England. That was many years later, 1988. But it's the most covered song I've got. It's been covered by 9 artists. And I don't think 10cc made a good record of it. I thought David Kirschenbaum's record was better. And I thought the record made with Chris Noel 10 years ago in Nashville was better. But I don't think the 10cc weren't really gelled yet. I think it would have been a year later, it would have been a far better record. I don't think it was a very good record. And White made the BBC record of the week. I don't know if that was payola or reality. These things you never know.
Yeah, exactly. Because it could have been a little bit of both. Now the thing is with Graeme Goldman, you talk about him as a brother. I mean, you became really close to him. I mean, his mother was like your mother.
Yeah, she called me his second son. I moved in with Graeme and his wife shortly after that, because I was living in a bedsit room, and I lived with him for slightly over a year. And we wrote, I don't know, a dozen songs together. A couple of them got recorded. We were just like you and me. It was like easy.
Yeah.
To this day, I mean, we spoke on the phone last week. I mean, he's 74. He lives in London with his third wife. He's actually a lot different. He's survived COVID. Thank God.
Oh, he had COVID.
Yeah, he had COVID. He
Oh,
got in
my.
Australia when 10cc were touring Australia, the same time as
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it only lasted for 2 days. He was very sick, only for 2 days. And then he got lethargy, lasted for months, and no appetite. So it did have a long-term effect, but he sounded great last week. We don't talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
But he's a huge supporter of the Wizard Brothers. He's a huge supporter of me. He's a huge supporter of
The Wizard Brothers is what we call our project, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people don't know who the Wizard Brothers are. So.
They will. It's just he's just there for me. I don't ask anything. I don't ask any favors. I ingratiate myself in his life. I think that's why it's lasted so long. I don't ask him to do this or do that. He just says to me every year or two, I say, should I stop sending you shit? And he always says, send me everything. I want everything. And I'm sure I'm the only person he does that for, but I don't know.
Yeah, you forwarded his emails to me, and they're always so gracious. I mean, he's for a guy who's had such an incredible career and who's so well connected and so well respected. I love that song that he wrote after he came off tour with Ringo.
Yeah.
You sent that to me?
Yes, I did, and we've talked about that. That was a big thing for him, touring with Ringo. Like he's the same Beatle freak as you and me, and we've talked a bit about it, I guess, off the record, and he was really honored. That was not. I mean, I know Randy's played on those tours, and Todd Rundgren and other people, but he really was honored. And he just did a short tour. He did a few dates in Europe, a few more dates in the States. He says he's not going to do it again. I don't know whether he'd be invited back or not, but he said Ringo was a true gentleman and treated them all like kings. And
Ringo seems to have his favorite all-star band now. Steve Lukather's always there.
Yeah,
Todd Rundgren's always there.
Yeah.
Oh God, the drummer. Oh, him and his brother. His brother's not in it. His brother plays for Elton John now. What the heck? Greg Bissonette. Yeah, and he's the drummer that plays alongside Ringo on those tours, and he seems to have basically his new Beatles that he tours with and records.
Good for him. And McCartney's done the same thing with the band.
Yes.
After a while, you want to know what the guy's going to do before he does it, and you can't do that without continuous connection.
Mm-hmm.
One time, you were about to do a Bachman show about I guess it was just pre-COVID. And I said, are you going to rehearse? And he said, you know what we're going to do.
Yes, I've been doing the same show for 20 years.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
The same 12 songs. You know, you just do it in different ways. Sometimes we do orchestra, sometimes we do it sitting on a stool, sometimes we stand up.
Well, before COVID, I did 2 shows a year for the last, 15 years, maybe a bit longer, I don't know. And I've never done the same show twice. I hardly do the same songs twice. I think every show you do, the audience deserves freshness and a risk. And I do take a risk.
Oh, you never slough. No, I mean, if I sounded like I didn't care, that's not the same as knowing what I'm going to do.
Of course, I don't understand.
Yeah.
You're a total pro and stuff. But I know that I spoke to the guy from Chilliwack. I've forgotten his name.
Bill Henderson?
Yeah, and he said they do the same songs every show. And he says it's because of SOCAN, so he doesn't have to fill in more forms. I thought that sounded a little bit sort of, I know that people want to hear those songs, so I'm not going to comment on it. But I like to hear deep catalog.
I'd love to do some deeper cuts with Randy. Randy's written a lot of songs that I'd love to do that got airplay. They didn't. They're not. Ain't seen nothing yet or taking care of business. But I mean, there's some. Like there's a song he had out called "Shelter" years ago that I just love, and I wish we would do it. You know, tons of other songs.
Yeah, and "Hey Jude" and "Let It Be" deserve a rest in the McCartney songbook too, because it's just the same thing. I mean, you need to do. I'd like to see him do an album of John songs. I would love that. Paul sings John. I would love to hear him sing "Imagine." I'd love to hear him sing "Love." I'd love to hear him sing "In My Life." I would love to hear Paul sing John. I'd love to produce it with you. I'd love to have that shot.
Right. Wow.
Don't hold your breath.
Yeah, I know. I'll get on that right away. He's my next call, by the way. So I gotta. Okay, so your album. So now, when you mentioned the album you did in Nashville with
Chris Noll,
and with that album, you redid some of your songs and had how did that album come together? What did you do there, and who was on that album? Yada. And when was it done? Why was it done?
Yeah, 2009. Why was it done? Because of my friendship with Chris Noll. I flew to Nashville. Andrew Gold, who was Graeme Goldman's partner.
Andrew Gold. Yeah, thank you for being a friend. And what a lonely boy. Amazing songwriter.
He was a really, really good friend of mine. I have nothing but kindness to speak about Andrew Gold. Andrew Gold was incredibly kind. I lived at his house. Whenever I was in LA, we played lots of music together. Well,
him and Graeme were a partnership for a while, correct?
Oh, a long time.
Yeah.
Andrew was in the very last incarnation of 10cc. Then they had 4 CDs as Wax.
Right.
Kind of electro pop kind of great songs, poor production, really great songs. Graeme never written a song in his life. And Andrew is just really, really good. And
incredible talent. Play Wax. Yeah, well, he plays every instrument.
Like a king, and like you do. And Graeme really, 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 really thinks highly of Wax. They never quite broke through. They had one song went to number 7 in Britain, but they were very close. So Andrew moved to Nashville for about a year and a half. And in that year and a half, he tried to become a Nashville songwriter, which never happened because he's LA. You can't fake it in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the phone with him one day. He says, why don't you come? Your songs are kind of story songs and they like story songs. I'll set it up. I'll set up meetings for you. So how could you not do that? So I flew to Nashville and he set up a bunch of meetings for me. And I wrote some songs with 2 Nashville writers and they were really good. One of them was covered by the Disney label Lyric Records and was a minor hit. But most importantly, I went to a coffee shop, or not a coffee shop, a Jewish sort of diner called Noshville's, Nosh.
What a great name.
Noshville. And I'm sitting there with a guy, and in walks Chris Noll, this guy who knew the guy I was with. And hey, come join us. So Chris sat across from me, and Chris was with John Denver his whole life. And then, of course, John died. So after John died, Chris, who was from New Jersey but lived in Nashville, became sort of like a hired gun. An amazing piano player, arranger, and makes a living doing whatever he can. And I just really liked him as a human being, and that's how I judge everybody, by if I liked him or not by anything else. And so I came back, and I've always loved my version of She Loves You, ever since I did it on my Supertramp tour, when Richard Hartson said it was the #1 song.
I'm going to put a link of that, by the way, into this, because your version of She Loves You is so far away from the Beatles, and it makes so much sense. I've never heard a cover that cool in my life of a Beatles song.
Very much. I did it on the car. I've never had anybody else slow down a Beatles song, except maybe Ticket to Ride and by the Carpenters, and I slowed it down. And it's an amazingly interesting lyric that nobody ever hears. All they ever hear is "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah." They don't hear about "apologize to her" and "pride can hurt you too." Those great lines. So I made the lyric more important than the chorus, and I dropped the "yeah, yeah, yes," and I slowed it down, and I changed 2 chords, and I phoned Chris Noll up. And I said, "Chris, I'm coming back to Nashville next month to continue my meetings. And could I hire you to do an in-home version of She Loves You on the grand piano? And if you'd be kind enough to put a flute on it." And, "Oh, yeah, man. Yeah, I'd love to work with you. What will you charge me?" And he said, $100. And I thought, whoa, that's incredible.
Wow.
So I go to his house, and there's a big American flag on the porch. And we spend the day together. And it was a day. It was a good 6-7 hours of work. And we did She Loves You, and he put a flute and he put strings on it. And we sang it live. He played the piano and I sang it. And that led to me making the Exposed Soul album, which was 4 separate trips to Nashville, where I'd go down there and do 4 songs with Chris in Sound Emporium, which was one of the top studios in Nashville, with a Nashville band. So there was Jack Pearson on guitar, who plays with Alabama, Dow Tomlin on bass, who plays with Brooks and Dunn. The drummer was a guy called Chris Brown, who played with a band called Sam Nash, who's a huge bluegrass guy, and Chris Noll on keyboards, and Barry Greenfield singing. And we played them all live, me in an isolated booth, and we did 4 songs. And it took us 3 takes each song, because those guys had the charts, and I don't know how they do it, but like the guys in LA, they just play it the second they hear it, and it sounds like they've written the song. And then we did the 4 songs, and then I said, "Now let's do She Loves You." All the guys were gone. Chris had the grand piano, and I went in the booth, and the tape that you link below is 5, because I always control the takes. And I said, "Take 5 it is," and take 5 we used, and then Chris put strings on it. And to me, it's one of my finest moments in music, because I'm working with one of the greatest songs ever written by the best songwriting team in pop music. And you'd have to be a fool to butcher it, although a lot of people butcher Beatles songs.
Yes, they do. And the one thing you say you took away from the chorus, where the yeah, 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 but the nice thing about that is the piano does bling, bling, bling. So you get that part inferred in your version, but it's not in your face like the yeah, 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 which is what everybody talked about when it came out. They missed the importance of the song because of the hook.
Well, that was conscious by me. I wanted people to go, yeah, 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 when they're listening to it. So I said, "Chris, play the yeah, yeah, yeahs on the piano, and hopefully the audience will sing it subconsciously
in their head,
audibly." Yeah, that's what I thought. I have no idea if it's true, but I've done the song tons in concert, and I've used the backing tape that Chris provided me, and I sing it live and play the tape. And it's a heartfelt moment, because you can tell the dude who's singing it just loves the Beatles and just loves the song. And I love the song. I think it's such a sad song about John talking to his friends saying, "Hey, don't lose this woman. It's so easy to lose a marriage. It's so easy to lose love. It's so easy to listen to your ego and your loud mouth in your head. Think about it. Pride can hear you too. Apologize to her, because she loves you, man. She loves you. You know that can't be bad. She loves you." And I think John Lennon, was in his early 20s when he wrote that with Paul in Paul's dad's house. And they were just really understanding human behavior.
They're so ahead of their time on everything.
And I love her. And I love her, yeah.
What an incredible, incredible thing. Unbelievable. Well, God, we've touched on so many things. What else you want to talk about before we close? By the way, Scott, you have some questions? I like to get these guys to ask questions because they think of things I'll never think of.
You know what? I'm enamored with today's show. We always interject with follow-on questions and get a chance to interject with our guests. But Barry, I'm serious. I'm speechless. I've just been sucked into listening to the storytelling you do and the passion that you have behind what you do and why you do it. I probably have 1,000 questions. I've just been drawn into today's show.
Well, thank you, Scott. You can't fake passion. You can't pretend to love somebody. And the word love is such a silly word. It's so abused. It's so overused in music. And I really love music. And I really wouldn't do this with anyone but Mick DeLaVie, because I am naked here and I am telling the truth and I'm sharing stories out of school. And I don't talk about this kind of shit a lot, but I've been asked by people to write books about it and stuff. And John Shields and I is another reason why I'm here, because John Shields is a heart-centered dude, and I feel safe, and that's why I've been.
I actually do have a question, and this is a really important question, because when I listen to you, I think there's a difference between people who get into music because they want to become famous and they want the glory and the money and the fame and all that, and there's people that get into it because it's a passion, it's a movement within inside them. And I think the things that you've talked about and the way you describe why you do what you do, there's got to be a golden nugget in there for people who want to get into this business, because I think hearing it from somebody like you has far more weight than somebody that just wants to do it because they want to be known. What would your golden nugget be for people?
Well, don't be a horse rider if you don't love horses. Don't be an artist if you don't love creating a picture. And don't go into music without finding what it is that you love about music. So what I love about music is really, really simple. I love songwriting. And there's so many people out there that write songs because they're 4 minutes long and they rhyme the words and it goes together nicely, but they're not songwriters, they're writers of songs. So find what you do well. If you're a great guitar player, work on being that guitar player. If you're a great arranger, do that. Don't be a jack of all trades. Be good at something and then find people that are better than you at the trades that you're not great at. I mean, I can bang off on the piano. I can't play piano like Mick DeLaVie or Chris Noel, but I can write songs. And so I use my song as my calling cards, and I surround myself with a team of wonderful people. And I don't do stuff. I never do stuff I don't want to do in my life. Oh, it's really true for me. That's my answer, is do it because you want to do it and not because you want to make money from it, because that's a mug's game.
Mm-hmm.
I see the genuine passion in that. Thank you so much for that word of advice.
Thank you, Scott.
I've got
Could it
one.
be the sage old dude in the room? Right?
Okay, Charles wants to speak as well.
You know, a theme that came through in all of your stories was your fearlessness, Barry. And I'm just wondering, you said, I don't know where it comes from, but I'm wondering if you could take a moment. I would love to know, just because that to me struck me so much, your courage, and just like it was normal getting on a plane to go meet John Lennon. And that seemed to go throughout your career of just, why not, you know?
Well, there's a picture, I'm pretty sure I sent it to Mick. And you can answer this yes or no, Mick, whether it's a picture of me, it's on my fridge right now, the day that I was at Apple, and underneath it is the word fearless. And that's a little fridge sticker I bought from my wife, because I think fearless is what you have to be. And to be fearless, you have to be willing to live with the consequences and not fear them, fearless. So where did I get the fearlessness to go to Apple and ask them to listen to my silly little songs? I think being raised in apartheid, being raised in racism, is what steeled me a bit to other crap. I don't sweat the small stuff much. I've been rejected by, you only hear the positive stories. I've been rejected, man, lots. Mel Torme told me to fuck off. That really hurt. Lily Tomlin told me to fuck off. That really hurt. Didn't need to say that to me. But I've been given so much kindness. Like Jimmy Haskell, who was the top arranger in the world, invited me to his house for 3 days. I mean, this is the guy that works with Frank Sinatra. So, I walked into his house and I was just Barry. I was just, I did my job. I didn't pretend I could tell him how to arrange. So you have to know where your strengths are, and you have to know and be willing to accept failure. And Frank Zappa said, failure is never fatal. Success is never final. And the other thing that I believe is you learn more from failure than from success. And you got to never give up. Like when I first met my wife, we've been married now for 5 years almost. She said, you would doggedly, you wouldn't let me, you would doggedly, this is my word, not hers, because it's not true, hunted her. But I did, I hunted her. I just knew, and I'd waited 63 years to meet this woman. And I love her from the bowel of my heart, from the belly of the beast. I love this woman. And I knew it before I met her, because we spoke on the internet for a few weeks with emails, because we didn't want to meet first. We wanted to talk on the computer. And it's the same with, I went to John Lennon because he was the Beatles, and they said to come, man. They invited me. They were on the TV. They said, come. I didn't, they invited me.
But
I saw
you
that as
had
an
the
invitation.
courage to get on the plane and go do that.
And it was scary, man. I was shit scared, and but I wasn't fearful. It's a difference. Thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Well, that picture over your left shoulder, what is that?
Is that me playing the guitar? Is that the picture? I don't know.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, that's I'm going to get that down because it's actually worth looking at because it's historical.
Oh.
I'll pick it up. Don't worry. This is live TV.
Yeah, look at that.
All right. So, okay, I've lost you.
That's okay. Yeah, you just have to push your button back.
This blue one here?
Should be a picture of a camera somewhere. You just push it.
I got it. There it is. I just found it.
There we go.
On now.
Great. Perfect.
I just redid my makeup, so I look a lot better. All right, see this picture here?
Yeah.
Okay, this was taken by Dee Lippingwell, who I'm sure you know, Mick.
Yep, I know her very well.
Okay, this was my very first big concert. And this was with Supertramp at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre.
Wow.
Actually, I just made that up. That isn't true. This isn't the picture I thought it was. This is a picture taken about 6 years ago at the Rothstein. But Dee Lippingwell took my picture with Supertramp. And I have that outside there, which I go get, I'm gonna bother. But that was a picture that I kept forever, and Dee Lippingwell gave me as a present. It's out there. It's not this one, but it was this one, but it's not. So edit all this out. It's all nonsense.
Did you not talk to me about Roger Hodgson, I think it was, who came up to you and loved your version of She Loves You?
Yeah, Roger Hodgson came to me during sound check. That's an interesting show.
Roger Hodgson from Supertramp, by the way. Yeah.
The lead guitar player. There was a phone call at 2 PM from Bruce Allen. And he said, hey, Greenfield, he always called me Greenfield. Triumvirate have just been busted at the border. And Triumvirate are a 3-piece metal band from Germany that were doing the tour dates with Supertramp. And they can't play with Supertramp tonight at Queenswood Theatre. Will you play there? And I thought for about half a second.
Why would Bruce call you? What's the background there?
Well, we were friends, or never friends, but we were associates. And I guess he knew me. I think he respected me. I think he still does. And he knew I'd be ready because I'm always ready. And that's, I've never been asked that before, but I think because he knew I'd be ready.
Interesting. Okay, well, go on.
So I said yes. And he said, we'll be there at 5 o'clock for sound check. So I said, how much you paying me? He said, $400, which is a lot of money for me. So I went down there at 5 o'clock, a 4:45. Never been in the Queen's Theatre to do a show before or anything of that size. And Supertramp's gear for Crime of the Century was all on the stage with a yellow umbrella. And I loved that band. And I went and sat in the stool and I played my sound check, 3 songs. And the sound check guy, who was Supertramp's sound check guy, said, do you have one more? And I said, sure. And I wasn't going to do it in the show, but I thought I'd like to hear how it sounded in there. So I played my version of She Loves You. And it lasted 2.5, 3 minutes. And then, thank you, be back here, at 7:30, you'll be on at 8. So got off the stool and my heart's beating, boom, boom, boom. And standing there, boom, was Roger Hodgson, who looked like Roger Hodgson. And he said, hello, I'm Roger. I wanted to thank you so much for coming in. With such short notice, you've saved our bacon. Thank you, thank you. Who arranged that Beatles song? And I said, I did. And he said, that's the #1 record. That was his phrase. That's the #1 record. And I said, thank you, Roger. And then I did the show and I did 8 more dates with them based upon that show. But the interesting part about that show is a CKLG disc jockey, I don't know who it was, came out before I came out and said, the place was packed, almost, I guess. And he said, we have bad news. Triumvirate were busted at the border. Can't play tonight. So we have a Barry Greenfield, put his hand out. And I don't know whether it was 20% or 50% booed. Out, booed. And so I'm walking out, sat on the stool, and just made the booze work for me by talking about it. And all I could see from the first song was people walking out to go get a drink at the bar at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. So I'm saying half the audience were left. It might have been more, might have been less. But by the end of the show, the response to my songs, my 45-minute set was, I believe, so strong that a lot of them had come back in because the place looked full again. And I got 2 encores. Wow. And because of those 2 encores, I'm pretty sure that's why I got the rest of the dates. It was $400 a date, plus room and board, plus I got to know Roger Hodgson, Benny Benberg, the drummer I really liked, and the bass player, whose name I don't remember, and the weird, crazy Davies guy, the other guy, the piano player who was really aloof, really different than them. You could see they weren't a band that were going to last. But they did Crime of the Century, and I saw it every night. And when they started off with the harmonica in school, oh my God, they were so good, Mick. They were such a great band. I saw them in their heyday. I actually got to know Russell Pope, their sound man, and I saw them in the Edmonton Coliseum at the sound desk and watched the whole show from his ear perspective. And it was unbelievable. I wonder if he was the guy that did the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in 1974. I wonder. Yes, he was he was actually an equal member of the band, because he even in the quietest moments, if you look on the credits, he gets credit as co-producer. I know the name. I've heard the name. Well, I'm sure I met him every night, but I don't remember. But it was just to see them play I went on quite a lot of tours after that. Cheech and Chong, Murray McLaughlin, Maria Muldaur, Cheech and Chong. Now there's an odd one. Yeah, Barry Greenfield opening up for Cheech and Chong. Yeah, I did. Earache my eye. Yeah, 3 days. It was so bizarre. I did 3 dates for them, and that was the last date I played live when I quit the business. I was on stage in either Kelowna or Vernon. It was the Peach Bowl. Is that in Kelowna? Peach Bowl? Maybe. And I made an announcement when I walked out, sat down to do my 45-minute set and said, this is the last time I'm ever playing live in public. And I kept that true for about 30 years. Wow. Now, so what year was that? I'm going to say 76, but I don't really know. Wow. So they were in their peak then. Oh, yeah. The Chong were huge. Yeah. Door number 3. And Gay Delorme played with you, and Gay Delorme wrote "Earache My Eye," Basketball Jones for them, and he was actually, they were a comedy trio. Gay Delorme opted out when they went down to LA to start their Cheech and Chong comedy routine. Cheech Marin and Gay Delorme wrote that first album. Tommy Chong didn't. I never knew that. And Gay Delorme stayed back to become a musician. And great musician. Oh yeah, fantastic. I played a lot of dates with him. Well, I played 2 songs with Gay Delorme in Tommy Banks' studio in Edmonton, Canada Sky and one of the boys from my Sanctuary record, and he played slide, and he was really, really good. About 25 years later, I phoned him up. He was living in New Westminster, and I said, will you join my band? And they were called Greenfield Greyhound. And he told me one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned. He said to me, Barry, when you're in a band, the band has to learn how to play the song by the way the boxes are. So play it completely 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 before you start experimenting. Because once you learn the song, you can then experiment with it. And I never really thought about that before, because I'd want to change the beginning and change the ending and extend the solo without really learning the song. And so that was a very valuable lesson. Gator Lorne, who's now left us, as so many of them have, was a very intuitive, clever, insightful musician.
Yeah, well, him and I played as a duo for a lot, quite a few dates. Yeah, and that was
9
probably
degrees of separation.
I think that, yeah, I know. I think that was right around the same time, because I saw the picture, and I know that he, because of his health concerns, he had lost his eyesight in one eye.
Diabetes.
And the picture with you, I can tell that he's lost his sight. So we were working with him at the same time in two different sort of vocations. Or
when I went with Gay, I would say his eyesight was 30%.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
He couldn't drive. I'd pick him up always, but he could obviously see his amp, and he was a great guy to play with because he'd work. He wasn't lazy.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about him, we brought this up in one of our other interviews with Mark LaFrance, again, I believe, because once again, we're talking about songwriting. And one of Gay's biggest headaches was the fact that he wrote the rodeo song. Well, it's 40 below and I don't give a fuck. He wrote that song. It was one of his biggest songs of all sympathy. But bands were recording it all over the place, thinking it was public domain and not giving him credit. And of course, so he's trying to hunt down all these bands and writing SOCAN saying, this band has released this song. This is my song. They've sold 2 million albums, and he says, why aren't people looking out for me here? This is my song, and he had to do it himself. And sadly, that's just the way it works.
You need help in this world, and you can't do it all yourself. I think I said that to one of our friends a few minutes ago. He needed to have a good lawyer, and he needed to do it properly. He was he was much more talented than the life portrayed.
So this comes full circle. We hate lawyers, but we need them.
Yeah. Well, they do serve purpose, because it's legal to have a baby, as Pete Townsend said.
Well, my good friend Bill Allman, he went in to become an entertainment lawyer, and he's by all levels, he's as good as they get. However, he let the bar go, and for the same reason as you. He says, I don't want to be one of those people. He understands it. He has lawyer friends who can be one of those people. He couldn't be one of those people. So now he's an impresario. That's mostly what he does. He puts on shows, et cetera, but he's he's a brilliant mind. One of my best friends is Don Jordan, who's an incredible corporate lawyer. But once again, Don comes from a musical background. He understands the arts, which is always a nice thing,
I think there are good lawyers, Mick.
Yeah,
that is absolutely far between. There's one other story I just want to share apropos to this entire conversation, which I want to thank all 4 of you for, because I think it's been really healthy for me to visit these things so clearly, and the questioning has been so astute, and I want to thank you for making this possible, all 4. But you asked me anything else I want to say, and it's a story about Nashville. As you know, Mick, of late I've been liking to make videos for YouTube, because I see it as a fun thing to do. That's primarily why I do it. And I do them from all history of my songs, some from the 70s. One of the last ones I did, which was for New Year's Eve, was a song called Sometimes. And it's a song I've never put on a record, but it's a song I recorded in Nashville with those great Nashville players. And it was an up-tempo 12-bar that I wrote. And it's a meaningless song, but I've always loved the energy of that song. And I spoke to Chris Knoll about it a few weeks ago, because I wanted to clarify my understanding of the song. And I said, was that the day that Bob Dylan was in Studio A when we were in Studio B in the Sound Emporium? Because I think it was. And Chris said, yeah, Bob was there. So the story is, I get there at 9 in the morning. The band would arrive about 9:10, 9:15, and I'd always make an appointment. I went to Nashville to meet the band in the parking lot and help them carry their gear in. And I used the same band for the 3 years I went to Nashville. And I always helped them carry their gear in, because no matter how great a drummer you are, you don't want to make 4 trips when you can make 2. No matter how great a guitar player you are, someone can help you with the guitar, maybe not the amp. Just make it easier. And I know that was an important part of our relationship, because Chris said they always got excited when they knew it was a Greenfield session. So we're sitting in the control booth, and the way that these things works in Nashville is we have an MP3 of the song, which is Barry Greenfield on the guitar. And Chris and I have spent the day before in Chris's studio working out the arrangements where the drums will come in. Chris has done a Nashville chart, which is just numbers. The 4 guys come in, they get coffee in their styrofoam cups from the machine in the front. And we're all sitting in the studio playing the MP3. And then I'm telling them what I want, and Chris is explaining it through the charts. And they're quiet and they're listening. We're about to go in the studio, and the owner of the studio comes in, who's a huge heavyweight producer in Nashville. And the best thing he ever did was Common Threads, the Eagles record. They got the Eagles back together, I think. And he was a very nice man. He said, listen, Bob Dylan's coming in today around about noonish, and he's going to be in Studio A. And his management have really strict rules. You don't talk to Bob. You don't look at Bob. You don't ask Bob any questions. You don't tell Bob that you love his music. You don't tell Bob shit. You don't talk to Bob. If you talk to Bob, Bob will get in the car and leave. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what we were told. And it kind of worked. We're a little bit scared. So we start playing, and at some point go to the bathroom. Let's say it's 1 o'clock, and you can't hear Studio A, but for some reason you can hear the Hammond organ, which sounded like Bob Dylan's kind of Hammond organ. So I swear to God, the 4 of us went to the bathroom 50 times in the next 3 hours in the hope that Bob was taking a pee. Well, Bob never took a pee, as far as I know. And eventually we go, and the door is open in Studio A, and there's nobody there, so Bob is gone. So I go inside Studio A by myself into this big cavernous room, and there's amps, and there's the Hammond B3 organ, and I walks in. He's confrontative. What are you doing here? Who the fuck are you? And he said, who the fuck are you? What are you doing here? And I said, I'm Barry Greenfield. I'm in Studio B, and I just wanted to be in Bob Dylan's atmosphere. And he flipped on a dime. He just changed completely. I guess he knew my name. He said, oh. I said, where did Bob stand? And Bob stood. I went and stood where Bob stood. He said, what happened? He said, it's the weirdest session I've ever done. He said, they all arrived. They hardly talked to each other. They played for 4 hours. Bob took every single piece of recording stuff that was, every digital, every software, everything there was that was recorded. We have no idea if it was a record, a rehearsal, learning songs. They just played for 4 hours and then left. And I then come back in and tell these guys this story. And they was worried that some stranger was in the studio because of all the expensive microphones and gear in there. So years later, I listened to Sometimes when I was making this video. It just sounds so really alive. I think that has a lot to do that Bob Dylan was 15 feet away making music for 4 hours. And those 4 hours were partly the time when we were doing our 3 takes of Sometimes. And I think that everything that happens when you're making a song, whether you're working at home in your studio, Mick, and it's what's going on around you, gets into your fingers, gets into your brain, gets into your heart, and comes out on the song. So if you've got Bob Dylan down the hall, it makes a big difference. When you're opening for Supertramp, you play better because it's Supertramp. So I've always tried to be in the proximity of genius because I think it makes you, which is me, slightly better. Or find the place where I need to go to be the best I can be with my gifts and my skills. So being around Bob Dylan, I think, is an interesting story because I think it affected everyone in the room. It's all we were thinking about. And they all went to the toilet and they all wanted to see Bob's pecker.
Like mine. Well, synergy is the word for it, I think. You know?
And no one was going to speak to him. We definitely weren't going to say, hey, Bob, I know I wasn't anyway.
Yeah, everybody was of like mind, you know. So yeah, there's a synergy that happens. I mean, that, you know, Mecca was right next door, and you guys were all facing it.
Well, you know, I met Ringo, and I was with Ringo for about 7 or 8 minutes, and I swear to God, the molecules in the air changed. It wasn't the same. I was invisible, I felt, when I was with him.
Yeah, interesting, eh? Interesting. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating, Barry. You're even better than I thought you'd be. I mean, my God, we've talked now for over 3 hours.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry for...
No, 2 hours, pardon me. Sorry.
Well,
my sense of time is no good. Great for a musician to say.
Anyway, it's been a wonderful 2 hours, and all 4 of you, I felt you every minute of it, John, and everybody else. And I've shared my heart and opened my soul, and I'm only 70. My best songs, or equal to my best songs, are still to come. And the next song that Nick and I are doing is called A Beautiful Band. It's a tentative title. And it's about our love for the 4 lads, and what a brave attempt it is to try and do a song about them. I think it's kind of crazy, but I know Mick's going to make it not sound Beatley, but sound heartful. And I'm really looking forward to it as much as any song we've done. So
can you hold on for a sec, Barry? Scott's going to sign us out here, but I'd like you to stick around, because I'd like all 4 of us. I'd like John to come on, and we'll all talk for a while after this. Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to go to the loo. I'll be back in a minute.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
I want to see if Bob Dylan's in the toilet.
Thanks for joining us. Check out our many other episodes and vignettes for more great content. And please like, share, and subscribe, and become a member at SocialNRGPresents.com to access all our content and earn valuable energy points just for watching.